Hey guys, welcome to the Field of 68 YouTube channel. If you like what you see here, hit that subscribe button and you'll get more college basketball content just like this.
To the news earlier tonight. John Calipari went on his weekly radio show in Lexington. His first public comments made since Kentucky got shocked by Oakland on Thursday night in the NCAA tournament. So, Cal had a lot of things to say. He said that he'll meet with Mitch Barnhart tomorrow to talk through the season. The whole tone of the interview was that of a coach who fully expects that he will be back next season. As we've talked about, the buyout for Cal, if Kentucky was to relieve him of his duties with no second weekend trips in the NCAA tournament since 2019, the buyout's over $33 million. Cal said this: he looks forward to what he has to say, meaning Mitch Barnhart, and how we can be better. He then went on to say on his radio show that instead of his team going to the Bahamas over the summer, like they've done here in past years, to play some competition, he wants to spend the summer, quote, grinding and working to play defense, end quote. He says he'll look at everything around the program, including the people around him. And then he said, quote, we need to get older. A reminder, Kentucky did start two fifth-year seniors this year, but okay, Cal says he wants to get older. So he said all of these things. He said some things to his fan base, said that Oakland was much more physical than his team. He said he knew the fans would go crazy. He says he thinks it will eventually die down. And then he says, quote, any fan out there, you guys got angry, but these players cried. I was sick like anyone else. There is a standard here. You've got to reach it. Our fans are engaged, but they are also engaged if we lose. Okay. So Randolph Childress, there were some surprise people tonight that, one, Cal did this before he has a meeting with Mitch Barnhart, because let's face it, we don't exactly know what that means going to entail. And based on past reports, it's not like they're best friends. What's the latest thought process from you now that the weekend's come and gone on Cal, his status, what you'd like to see change, and where your head's at with all this?
Uh, I'll say this: huge fan, a tremendous amount of respect for Coach Cal. I mean, we know who he is and what he is. I do think it's that at the bare minimum, that meeting. I think that's what it is. I think the meeting has to be even for Cal, for Coach Cal. I think for Calipari and for the AD is where are we going? Um, Coach needs to know because I doubt if he wants to be around. I would imagine all summer long what he's going to hear from those fans living in that community. What his family has to hear, his wife has to hear that when she leaves out of the house. Passionate as those fans are, they're liable to say anything to him walking around, and I don't know how fun that'll be. He does have to change some things from a basketball perspective. I think that you're talking about spending the summer grinding on defense. Um, that okay, whatever that means, you got to figure out a way to get them guarding during the course of a season. I think one of the biggest issues they have is just the overall construction of the roster. He has to consider
Mm-hmm.
that and do things differently. Not just that they're young. You had three guys essentially playing two positions there, and usually McDonald's All Americans. They don't. That doesn't always work either. Three. They needed one of those three freshmen to be a transfer, portal guy with a level of experience. So I think that's something that he can do, almost like a general manager's, take on how he constructs his roster. So whether it's staff, whether it's something his philosophically, I think he has to change. There has to be something significant saying when that meeting is over with. There has to be an announcement because the truth is he hasn't changed a lot himself. And when you've had the type of success that he has had, you don't need to change. There is time for some change, but whether it be philosophically or whatever it is, something has to come out of that meeting that moves them forward. Period.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just, adapting to the times of college basketball. And I still think he needs to recruit the best players in the country and do what he always has done that's made him super successful. But teams are older, rosters are older. I mean, being in the league with them when he was there, being an assistant at Florida for 4 years and trying to scheme and prepare I mean, they had more talent than you a lot of nights when you line up and play, except the one year in 2014 where we went undefeated in the SEC. You know, we had an older team than he did. But trying to adapt to those times, I think, is something that's going to come out of this meeting. But look, my whole thing on this whole deal with Calipari, and I've said this before, 6 Final Fours, a national championship, 6, SEC championships, regular season, 6 SEC tournament championships. I mean, if you look at his winning percentage, it's through the roof. It's like, okay, if this breakup needs to happen, like, who are you getting? Like, who are you legit coming in that can deal with the shark tank that is Kentucky basketball? I think that's the question that Kentucky fans need to, ask themselves. And, athletic director Barnard needs to ask himself in terms of that. But I think out of this meeting, it's just what's the direction that we're going in. If you look at some of their since 2019, that their tournament struggles, and I believe this, and it's not just because I have a lot of respect for him. I have tremendous respect for Cal. He was great to me while I was at UMass. But John Robick's another guy that hasn't been on Cal's bench for a while. And you could tell when he was there, from a basketball standpoint, Cal really leaned on him and relied on him. And he hasn't been there. I think his last year was 2020. John Robick's an outstanding coach. He was a head coach once in his career too. So you don't know if it's staff changes that are coming. Something's going to change. I just don't see John Calipari not being on the sidelines next year for Kentucky with all the money that they have to own. And look, there's not a job out there that makes sense that you're like, okay, hey, Texas is open. Cal should go to Texas. Texas is not open. They just signed Rodney Terry to a 5-year deal. So there's not a job that Calipari's, going to walk away for.
There is a job. There is a job. There, and it's right. It's in the same state.
Yeah, it's in the same state.
So let's be clear. There's a big enough job that could take it on, and honestly, that would make the most sense. Listen, we've already said how what he's accomplished and what it is. But the truth is, when you're at Kentucky, it's like being at Carolina. Hubert takes over Carolina. 1 year, he's in the Natty. Next year, he doesn't make the tournament. There were people saying this year he was coaching for the job to be remaining the head coach in North Carolina. There are certain programs where you cannot just live off of what you've done. And this thing has changed. And I think the reason why people are upset or people want change is because you're right. Nobody's telling him not to recruit the freshmen and whatever. They're just saying we seem like we're stalling out. It's the same stuff, and it's like it seems like we're not fixing the same issues. That's what's bothering some of the people. I think it's and you can, if it means, hey, Cal, come up and be in the front office. Be in the front office, what your contract allows you to do. And part of this, do you want to deal with this?
Right.
Do you want to continue to be this person and deal with this? But there are opportunities, man. You as a coach, you can't stay in a place too long. Kentucky isn't a place where you can win a championship and then just be like, all right, I'm good. I can put this thing in autopilot and ride it. And I think that as great as he was early on, he's a victim of his own success, and he has to make changes around that or go somewhere else and hit the reset button.
Totally agree.
And I think that's what he needs to go to that meeting with and say, hey, either because it's gonna. I say this because even with staff changes for him, it's gonna be hard. Those are his dudes. Those are his guys that he had all around. Are you willing to go have that hard conversation and say, hey, and it isn't just you guys. It's however it needs to go. And I'm not putting it off on the staff. I'll say this even a better question, and I haven't coached with him. I don't know. Will he listen to them? It don't matter.
Yes.
That's the thing you realize is that if he's going to listen to it, it doesn't matter who he goes out and get and listen. If we're on a staff, Matt, and I'm sitting here making suggestions, and you don't listen to what I'm saying, guess what? Eventually, I'm going to sit there and be like, okay. But I'm just the guy that's going to tell you flat out when you come bitching at me, and I'm going to come back and be like, you got to listen. So we don't know. That's what I mean when I say you got to come out of this meeting and it's got to be a firm. And that's essentially what he's saying. It's got to be, when we look at this thing from top to bottom, is everything's in play. Everything's in play.
Everything. Totally agree.
I totally agree with that as well. I think that first off, it's a smart PR move by Cal. he did the radio show tonight, people are like, how did Kentucky allow that? How did they allow him to do that? Excuse me, for them to disallow him, Mitch Barnhart would have to talk to John Calipari. Also, do you know who the boss is here? John Calipari. He's the boss. He's his own boss. Nobody's telling him what to do or not to do. Until this meeting happens, which it's happening tomorrow, everything's on the table because John Calipari is 65 years young. He plans to be at Kentucky the rest of his career. He sent in a feature that I talked with him about last year. He can't see himself anywhere else. But when Mitch Barnhart and John Calipari sit down tomorrow, the biggest question that you ask, like any powerful head coach and powerful AD of all time, is will they check their egos at the door and will they have a real conversation about what has to happen? Because in my opinion, if that real conversation is not willing to happen, then we might see something explosive happen in Lexington. Real change has to occur. Doing the same thing over and over again with a program with far better expectations is the absolute definition of insanity. They have not met the bar. You can both call him a legendary coach and acknowledge that over the last half decade, this program has come very short of meeting that bar. And now it's time for an honest conversation. Will these two parties be willing to have it?
Thank you for watching the Field of 68. If you've enjoyed what you've seen here, hit that like button, share this link with your friends, or check out the description for some other places that you can consume Field of 68 content.